The air in the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel smelled of expensive lilies and the metallic tang of overchilled champagne. Elena Vance stood in the shadows of the velvet wings, her fingers flying across a tablet. On stage, Julian Thorne, CEO of Thorne Dynamics and the man she had loved for 5 years, was mesmerizing a crowd of 1,000 investors. Innovation, Julian said, his voice dropping to a persuasive, honeyed register, is not a spark, it is a marathon. It is the courage to see the invisible. Elena smiled softly. She had written that line at 3 a.m. 3 weeks ago while Julian slept soundly beside her. She had spent months perfecting the Aegis algorithm he was about to announce, a piece of code that would revolutionize data security. To the world, Julian was a visionary. To Elena, he was the masterpiece she had spent her 20s painting. She smoothed the front of her navy silk dress, understated, elegant, the perfect attire for a woman who lived in the margins. Tonight was their 5th anniversary. Julian had hinted at a life-changing announcement. Elena felt the weight of the small velvet box she imagined was in his pocket. But tonight isn't just about software, Julian continued, his eyes scanning the crowd. It's about the future of the Thorne brand, and a brand needs a face that inspires, a face that captures the spirit of the next generation. Elena stepped forward slightly, her heart hammering against her ribs. This was it. "Please join me in welcoming the future Mrs. Thorne," Julian beamed, "Chloe St. James." The spotlight swung away from the stage and landed on a girl sitting in the front row. She was 22, a blonde influencer known for travel vlogs and a smile that had never known a day of corporate stress. Chloe floated onto the stage, her sequined dress catching the light like a disco ball. Julian caught her by the waist, pulling her into a cinematic kiss as the room erupted in applause. Elena's world didn't tilt, it shattered. She felt a cold, numbing sensation creep up her limbs. She waited for Julian to look at her, to offer a glance of apology or explanation, but he didn't. He looked at the cameras. A hand touched her elbow. Elena flinched, turning to see a man in a sharp, anonymous suit. He wasn't a guest, he was a courier. "Miss Vance?" he whispered over the roar of the crowd. "Yes?" He handed her a thick manila envelope, service of termination and a severance summary. "Mr. Thorne's legal team has also requested I collect your company-issued devices immediately." Elena looked from the envelope to Julian, who was currently laughing as Chloe playfully straightened his tie, a tie Elena had picked out. "He's firing me?" Elena's voice was a ghost of itself. "The document states your role as strategic assistant is no longer consistent with the company's rebranding," the man said mechanically. "There is a car waiting outside to take you to the penthouse. You have 2 hours to vacate." The penthouse felt like a graveyard. Elena didn't cry. She moved with a terrifying robotic efficiency. She shoved her clothes into a suitcase, but her hand paused when she reached the mahogany desk in the corner of the library. Hidden in the back of the bottom drawer was a leather-bound journal, Julian's success playbook. He'd kept it since they started the company in a cramped garage. She flipped it open. Page after page of her own ideas transcribed in his messy scrawl. Elena says the architecture needs to be decentralized. Elena's fix for the latency issue worked. I don't know how the math works, but she says it's solid. He knew. He had always known he was a figurehead. She turned to the final entry, dated only 2 days ago. Aegis is ready for the beta launch. Once the board signs off on the merger, I won't need the ghost anymore. Chloe is better for the IPO. She makes people feel good. Elena makes people feel small because she's always the smartest person in the room. Elena's grip tightened on the leather. A sharp, bitter laugh escaped her throat. "You think I make you feel small, Julian? You have no idea how small you're about to become." She turned to her laptop, her personal one, the one the courier hadn't taken. She logged into the private server where the Aegis beta was hosted. Julian was planning to launch it at the Global Tech Summit in 3 weeks. She looked at the lines of code, the beautiful, complex logic she had birthed. Then she saw it, a tiny, microscopic flaw in the decryption layer. It wasn't a bug she had put there, it was a natural instability she was planning to patch tonight after the gala. Without that patch, the software would run perfectly for exactly 72 hours. On the 4th day, it would begin to eat itself, collapsing the very data it was meant to protect. Her finger hovered over the save button. She could fix it right now. She could be the bigger person. She could leave him with a functional empire and walk away with her dignity. She looked at the manila envelope on the bed. No longer fits the brand image. Elena closed the laptop without fixing the code. She tucked the success playbook into her bag, walked out of the penthouse, and tossed her keycard into the hallway trash can. Julian Thorne had just declared war on the person who built his world. He had no idea that he had just handed her the blueprints to tear it down. The rain in Seattle didn't fall, it hovered. A fine silver mist that blurred the edges of the skyscrapers. Elena stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her new workspace, a brutalist concrete loft that felt more like a fortress than an office. She looked at her reflection in the glass. The soft, manageable waves Julian liked were gone, replaced by a blunt, asymmetrical bob that hit her jawline like a blade. The navy silk dresses had been donated. Today, she wore a charcoal power suit with shoulders sharp enough to draw blood. She wasn't Elena Vance, the strategic assistant, anymore. To the venture capitalists she'd been courting for the last 2 weeks, she was simply the architect. "He's called 3 times this morning," a voice rumbled from the shadows of the lounge. Elena didn't turn. She knew the sound of Silas Vane's voice. It was like granite grinding against silk. Silas was the only man in the city Julian Thorne actually feared. While Julian spent his time on magazine covers, Silas lived in the code, building a rival empire that favored substance over hype. "Let him call," Elena said, her voice steady. "Desperation has a specific scent, Silas. I want to let it marinate." Silas stepped into the light. He was a tall, imposing man with sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms corded from rowing and eyes that seemed to see through walls. He leaned against her desk, looking at the tablet displaying the plummeting stability of Thorne Dynamics beta test. "The Aegis software is hemorrhaging," Silas noted, a ghost of a smirk playing on his lips. Julian put out a press release saying it was scheduled maintenance, but the investors are smelling blood. You really left him a sinking ship. "I didn't sink it," Elena corrected, finally turning to face him. "I just stopped bailing him out. There's a difference." Silas studied her. In the 2 weeks they had been working together, he hadn't tried to flirt, hadn't tried to diminish her, and, most surprisingly, hadn't tried to take credit for the Aegis kill switch strategy she'd brought him. "Why me, Elena?" he asked quietly. "You could have gone to any firm in the valley with what you have." "Because you don't want to be famous, Silas. You want to be right. And because you're the only one who knows that the person who builds the wall is more powerful than the person who owns the house." Silas walked closer, stopping just outside her personal space. "You're still thinking like a ghost. You're hiding behind a pseudonym and a new haircut. If we're going to do this, if we're going to launch Vanguard and bury Thorne, you have to stop being the architect and start being the CEO. Elena felt a flare of old anxiety. "The world thinks I'm a secretary who got lucky with a severance check." "Then show them the person who wrote the math," Silas challenged. "Stop letting him define the narrative." Before she could respond, her phone buzzed on the desk. The caller ID was a private number, but she knew the rhythm of the digits. "It's time," she said. The meeting was held at the Obsidian, an ultra-exclusive club where the lighting was dim and the privacy was absolute. Julian was already there, sitting in a velvet booth looking uncharacteristically haggard. His tie was loosened, and the golden boy glow was dimmed by a layer of frantic sweat. When Elena walked in, he didn't recognize her at first. He stood up expecting the architect, the mysterious consultant his board had begged him to hire to save the Aegis launch. "Miss," Julian began, his professional smile faltering as she stepped into the light of the table's single candle. His jaw dropped. "Elena?" "Julian," Elena said, her voice cool and hollow. She sat down across from him, not waiting for an invitation. "What is this, some kind of joke? I'm waiting for a consultant, a specialist." "You're looking at her." Elena slid a sleek black folder across the table. Inside was a single page, a diagnostic of the Aegis decay, showing exactly when the system would suffer a total blackout. Julian's eyes scanned the page, his face turning a sickly shade of gray. "How do you have this? This is proprietary data." "I wrote the data, Julian. I know where the cracks are because I'm the one who stopped filling them." Julian leaned back, a bitter laugh escaping him. He tried to summon the old charm, the tilt of the head, the softening of the eyes that used to make her heart melt. "I see. This is about the gala, about Chloe. Look, Elena, I get it. You're hurt. You're trying to prove a point. And honestly, it's impressive. This whole architect persona, it's edgy. It's hot." Elena felt a wave of nausea. He still thought this was a performance for his benefit. "I'm overextended," Julian continued, reaching across the table to try and touch her hand. She moved it before he could. "Chloe, she's a distraction, a PR move that got out of hand. I need you back, Elena, not as an assistant. I'll give you a VP title, a corner office. We can fix Aegis together, and we'll be the power couple of the century, just like we planned." Elena looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the hollow ambition, the way he viewed her as a tool to be picked up when needed and put back in a drawer when inconvenient. "You didn't read the diagnostic, did you?" she asked softly. Julian blinked. "What?" "The software isn't failing because of a bug, Julian. It's failing because the foundation was built on a lie. You told the board you understood the encryption layers. You told the investors the logic was yours." She leaned in, her eyes cold as Arctic ice. "I'm not here to fix your company. I'm here to tell you that I've already sold the fix to Silas Vane." Julian's face transformed. The charm vanished, replaced by a mask of pure, ugly rage. "You did what? You signed an NDA, Elena. I will ruin you into the Stone Age. I will ruin you." "The NDA covered Thorne Dynamics' secrets," Elena stood up, smoothing her jacket. "But the patent for the core logic I filed under my own name 4 years ago, Julian. I used my personal laptop and my own time. You never checked the filing papers because you were too busy choosing the font for the annual report." She leaned down, whispering so only he could hear. "You didn't replace me overnight, Julian. You lost me years ago. You just were too arrogant to notice." As Elena walked out of the club, she didn't look back. She could hear Julian shouting behind her, the sound of a glass shattering against the floor. Outside, Silas was waiting in the back of a black car. He opened the door for her. "How did he take it?" Silas asked. Elena sat down, feeling a strange, soaring lightness in her chest. "He threatened to ruin me." Silas handed her a tablet. On the screen was a draft of a press release. Vanguard Systems announce new CEO, Elena Vance. "Let him try," Silas said. "The world is about to find out who really owns the light." The screen of Elena's phone felt hot against her palm, a glowing conduit for the vitriol pouring out of the digital world. "Elena Vance, the bitter ex-assistant trying to sabotage the future," read the headline on a major tech tabloid. Below it was a photo of her leaving a coffee shop, her face pale and hair windblown, captioned with, "Sources claim Vance has struggled with stability since her termination." Julian wasn't just fighting her in a courtroom, he was fighting her in the court of public opinion. He had unleashed Chloe. The influencer had posted a tearful 10-minute video to her millions of followers, painting Elena as a stalker who was obsessed with Julian and determined to destroy his life's work because she couldn't handle being replaced. "He's playing his only remaining card," Silas said, leaning over her shoulder in the Vanguard war room. The room smelled of ozone and black coffee. "He can't fix the code, so he's trying to break the coder." Elena stared at the comments, thousands of them, a digital mob calling for her to be blacklisted. Her stomach twisted into a cold knot. For years, she had stayed in the shadows to protect Julian's image. Now that same image was being used as a wrecking ball against her. "It's working," she whispered, her voice tight. "2 of the venture capitalists I spoke to yesterday have already pulled out of our preliminary meeting. They don't want to be associated with a PR nightmare." Silas walked around the desk and gently took the phone from her hand, placing it face down. He didn't offer a platitude. Instead, he pulled up a monitor showing the back-end telemetry of Julian's Aegis software. The graphs were a forest of jagged red lines. "Look at this, Elena," Silas commanded. "The decay is accelerating. In 48 hours at the Global Tech Summit, Julian is going to walk onto that stage and try to sell a hollow shell. He's using Chloe and the tabloids to create enough noise so no one hears the engine failing." He looked her dead in the eye. "You have a choice. You can hide until the storm passes, or you can become the storm." Elena took a deep breath, the scent of the rain-drenched Seattle air outside the window grounding her. "He sent a cease and desist this morning. His lawyers are claiming that even if I own the patents, the intellectual labor was performed under his payroll. They're trying to lock me in a legal stalemate for years." "Then we don't fight him in a cage," Elena said, her eyes sharpening as the old, brilliant strategist took the wheel. "We fight him in the open. Silas, I need the keynote slot at the summit, the one right after Julian." Silas raised an eyebrow. "That's the graveyard slot. Everyone will be heading for the exits or filing their stories about Julian's launch." "Not if I give them a reason to stay," Elena replied. "Julian thinks I'm playing a game of revenge. He doesn't realize I'm playing a game of ownership." The following 36 hours were a blur of high-stakes preparation. Elena lived on caffeine and adrenaline. She and Silas's legal team pored over the patent filings she had quietly registered 4 years ago, documents Julian had been too disinterested to read. Every time she felt her resolve waver, she thought of the success playbook. She thought of the entry where Julian called her a tool that made him feel small. On the eve of the summit, her phone rang. It was Julian. She hesitated, then answered, signaling Silas to record. "Elle?" Julian's voice was smooth, though she could hear the frayed edges of panic underneath. "Silas Vane, really? You're better than being a pawn for my rival." "I'm not a pawn, Julian. I'm the board." "Listen to me. The board is breathing down my neck. They've seen your architect rumors. If you drop this patent nonsense and come out with a statement saying you were confused or stressed, I'll make the lawsuit go away. I'll give you $5 million. Cash. You can go to Paris, start over, buy a gallery, whatever you want." He actually sounded like he thought he was being generous. "Is the software failing that badly, Julian?" Elle asked. There was a long silence on the other end. "I know you didn't break it, Elle. You're too proud for that. But you're the only one who can stabilize the decryption layer before tomorrow. Chloe is... she's great for the cameras, but she can't help me here. I need you." "You already had what you wanted, Julian. You have the face of the brand. Now you get to find out what happens when the brand has no brain." "You're making a mistake," Julian hissed, the charm finally curdling into a threat. "Tomorrow, I'm going to be the hero of the tech world, and you'll just be a footnote of a girl who couldn't let go." He hung up. Elena looked at Silas, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. "He's desperate," Silas noted. "He's predictable," Elena corrected. She turned back to her laptop, her fingers flying across the keys. She wasn't just preparing a speech, she was preparing a funeral for a legacy that was never truly Julian's. The day of the Global Tech Summit arrived with a suffocating heat. The San Francisco Convention Center was a sea of black blazers, flashing cameras, and the electric hum of anticipation. Backstage, Elena stood in a small dressing room. She looked at herself in the mirror. She wore a suit of ivory white, a stark contrast to the shadows she had lived in for years. A knock at the door revealed Silas. He looked out of place in a tuxedo, but his presence was a grounding weight. He handed her a small encrypted thumb drive. "The Vanguard servers are live," he said. "The moment you signal, we bypass his encryption and show them the real-time decay. Are you ready?" "He's on stage now, isn't he?" "He just started. The crowd is eating it up. He's talking about the soul of the machine." Elena felt a cold, sharp smile touch her lips. Good. Let him get as high as he can. It's a longer way down. She stepped out of the dressing room and toward the wings of the main stage. Through the heavy curtains, she could hear Julian's voice booming over the speakers, charismatic and hollow, selling the world a miracle she had built and he had stolen. She took a breath, feeling the weight of the thumb drive in her pocket. The assistant was gone. The ghost was dead. It was time for the architect to speak. The stage of the San Francisco Convention Center was a monolith of glass and light. Julian Thorne stood at the center of it, a digital deity draped in a $5,000 suit. Behind him, a 60-foot screen displayed the Aegis logo, a shield made of shimmering gold lines. "We aren't just selling security," Julian's voice boomed, amplified by a sound system that made his words vibrate in the audience's chests. "We are selling peace of mind. Aegis is the first self-evolving firewall. It learns, it adapts, it protects. And tonight, we go live." From the wings, Elena watched the demo. On the screen, the software began its automated sweep of a simulated bank network. To the uninitiated, the progress bars were a soothing, rhythmic green. But Elena saw the microstutters. She saw the decryption layer's latency ticking up by milliseconds. The rot had reached the core. "Now," Julian said, his smile blinding, "let's look at the real-time stability." This was the moment. Elena didn't sneak onto the stage. She walked. The click of her heels against the polished floor was picked up by the house mics, a rhythmic tap, tap, tap that cut through Julian's rehearsed cadence. The crowd of 3,000 murmured. Julian froze, his head snapping toward her. For a heartbeat, the mask of the visionary slipped, revealing the terrified boy underneath. "Elena?" he hissed, moving his mic away from his face. "Get off the stage! Security!" "Don't bother, Julian," Elena said. Her voice was calm, projected through the headset Silas had secured for her. She didn't look at Julian. She looked at the front row, at the board of directors, the lead investors, and the tech journalists. "The stability Julian is showing you is a loop. If he refreshes the live feed, you'll see the truth. The Aegis system isn't protecting the data, it's consuming it." "She's a disgruntled ex-employee," Julian shouted to the crowd, his face flushing a deep, ugly crimson. "She's unstable. This is a desperate attempt to—" "Refresh the feed, Julian," Elena challenged, stopping 3 feet from him, "or I will." She held up a remote. With a thumb press, she overrode the stage display. The golden shield on the screen shattered. In its place, a cascade of red diagnostic code poured down like digital blood. The peace of mind Julian had promised was replaced by a massive system failure warning. The room went deathly silent. "My name is Elena Vance," she said, turning to the audience. "For 5 years, I was the lead architect of Thorne Dynamics. I am the sole author of the Aegis logic, and I am the holder of the 3 primary patents currently being utilized without license by this man." Julian lunged for the remote, but Elena stepped back with a grace that made him look clumsy. "You signed an NDA," Julian screamed, his voice cracking. The cameras were all on him now, the frantic, sweating CEO losing his empire in real time. The NDA covered trade secrets of Thorne Dynamics, but you can't trade a secret you don't own. I filed these patents 4 years ago under my own name, using my own resources. I didn't steal your software, Julian. You tried to steal mine. And as the patent holder, I'm officially revoking the license. Aegis is offline. As the screen went black, the room erupted. The board of directors rose as one, their faces masks of fury directed at Julian. In the front row, Chloe St. James looked at Julian, then at the chaos, then tucked her phone into her bag and slipped out the side exit before the first stock ticker could update. Julian looked at the audience, then at the empty seat where Chloe had been, and finally at Elena. "You ruined it," he whispered, his voice trembling. "We could have had everything." "You already had everything, Julian," Elena said, her eyes filled with a pity that cut deeper than any insult. "You just didn't realize I was the one holding it up." 2 months later. The new office was at the top of the Vance Tower. It didn't have the cold, sterile feel of Julian's penthouse. It was filled with light, books, and the hum of a team that worked in the daylight. Elena sat at a reclaimed oak desk looking at a digital tablet. The news was still buzzing with the Thorne fall. Julian's company had declared bankruptcy after a series of shareholder lawsuits. He was currently being investigated for fraud. The success playbook Elena had leaked to the SEC had been the final nail in his coffin, proof that he had knowingly misrepresented his technical expertise to investors for years. A shadow fell across her desk. Silas stood there holding 2 glasses of sparkling cider. "The final signatures are in," he said, sliding a thick contract toward her. Elena scanned the document. Her eyes lingered on the first page. There were 2 names at the top, in the same font, in the same size: Silas Vane and Elena Vance. 50-50, Silas said, clinking his glass against hers. Elena picked up a pen. She felt the weight of it, not as a tool to write someone else's legacy, but as the instrument of her own. She signed her name with a flourish, the ink bold and permanent. "How does it feel?" Silas asked, watching her with that rare, genuine smile. Elena looked out the window at the Seattle skyline. The sun was breaking through the clouds, hitting the water of the Sound and making it sparkle like shattered diamonds. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like the woman behind the man. She didn't feel like a secret weapon or a brand image. "It feels like I've finally stopped writing the draft and started the story," she said, taking a sip of her drink. She picked up her phone and saw a blocked number had left a dozen messages. She didn't open them. She didn't feel anger or even the lingering sting of betrayal. She simply selected the delete all option. Elena Vance stood up and walked toward the conference room where her new team was waiting. She wasn't just the architect anymore. She was the owner of the building, and for the first time, she was exactly where she belonged.